Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with our latest stories.
The party shimmered with elegance, crystal glasses clinking, low jazz humming from hidden speakers, and candlelight flickering across polished wood and silk dresses. To any outsider, it was a perfect evening. But for Emily it felt like theater. She moved through the room like a well-rehearsed actress, smiling, nodding, laughing in all the right places. Her husband William stood across the room, engrossed in conversation, his hand casually resting on a colleague's shoulder. Emily's wine was untouched, her thoughts miles away. The voices around her blended into a dull hum, background noise to the quiet ache building inside her. Everything looked beautiful, and yet nothing felt real. She used to love these kinds of gatherings, used to feel excited by the company, the stories, the music. But lately it all felt like wallpaper. Nice to look at, but impossible to touch. The woman reflected in the glass of the fireplace didn't feel like her anymore. She felt faded, invisible, forgotten. And then just as she turned away, she sensed it, that pull. A presence at her side. Not loud, not invasive, but there. Watching, waiting. It was the moment everything changed, though she didn't know it yet. Not until she met his eyes. Ethan's. She hadn't even noticed him approach, not at first. The party moved around her like a gentle tide. Soft laughter, the clink of glass, a fireplace murmuring in the background. Emily stood near a bookshelf, admiring a sculpture she'd seen a dozen times before, when a quiet voice cut through the haze. "You have no idea how people look at you, do you?" The words weren't flirtatious. They were calm, certain, and strangely intimate. She turned slowly, her breath catching before she could place the voice. It was Ethan, William's friend. The charming one, always warm, always just on the edge of something deeper. Tonight, though, he looked at her differently. Not like someone making small talk, but like someone seeing something. Really seeing it. "Excuse me?" she asked, trying to laugh, but her voice cracked with the effort. Ethan leaned in just enough for her to hear over the music. "You walk into a room and change its temperature. Most people don't even notice it. But I do." There was no smugness in his tone, only quiet certainty. Something about it lodged under her skin, unsettling and electric. Her cheeks flushed, but not from embarrassment. From recognition. She hadn't heard words like that in years. Hadn't felt like that in longer. She brushed it off. Called it wine, called it nonsense. But something had been set in motion. Something she didn't yet have a name for. And as Ethan gave her a knowing smile and stepped away, she realized her heart was beating faster than it had in months. Emily tried to dismiss it. She told herself it was just a passing comment. The kind of thing people say at parties when the wine is flowing and the lights are low. But as the night unfolded around her, Ethan's words clung to her skin like perfume, faint, persistent, and impossible to forget. "You walk into a room and change its temperature." She repeated it in her mind quietly, as if testing its weight. The voices of her friends faded in and out like waves on a shore. But inside her, something had shifted. It wasn't just the compliment. It was the way he said it, without agenda, without performance. As if he'd been holding the thought for a long time and finally let it slip. Emily glanced across the room and caught Ethan in conversation, yet somehow she felt his attention still tethered to her. Like a thread neither of them could see but both could feel. The feeling was unnerving, but not unpleasant. It wasn't lust or fantasy, it was presence. For the first time in years she felt noticed. Not as someone's wife or the dependable mother, but as a woman. A person. A soul with gravity. The restlessness crept in slowly, curling around her like smoke. How long had it been since someone looked at her like that? Since she had looked at herself like that? Emily didn't know what any of it meant yet. But as she laughed at a joke she barely heard, she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't unhear his voice. The patio was quiet, mercifully so. Emily stepped outside, letting the night air wrap around her like a silk shawl. The muffled laughter and clinking glasses inside faded behind the closed door, replaced by the soft rustle of trees and the low hum of distant traffic. She exhaled slow and deep, as if trying to breathe herself back into something solid. Her heart was still fluttering in that strange, unfamiliar rhythm. And then, without warning, he was there. Ethan, as if summoned by thought. He moved with quiet ease, stopping beside her at the railing, close enough to share space but not too close to cross it. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, warm, and tinged with something that wasn't quite concern. Emily gave a small laugh. "Just needed a break from all the noise." He nodded, eyes on the horizon. "You seem different tonight," he said after a beat. She turned, caught off guard again. "Different how?" Ethan hesitated, his gaze meeting hers. "Like you're remembering something you forgot about yourself." The word struck like a tuning fork, unexpected and perfectly pitched. Emily blinked, her throat suddenly dry. She couldn't speak. Was she? Maybe she was. Maybe this quiet pull she felt wasn't about Ethan at all. It was about the version of herself she'd tucked away, folded under years of obligation and routine. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The distance between them was charged but still unbroken. And in that silence, Emily realized she hadn't felt this alive in a very, very long time. Back inside, the room had resumed its gentle rhythm. Laughter rolling like music, the clatter of dessert plates, soft candlelight dancing across wine glasses. But for Emily, everything had changed. She moved among the guests, refilling her drink, smiling at the right people, laughing when expected, but it was all reflex. Her mind wasn't here. It was caught in a different current, somewhere just beyond the surface of this polished evening. Every time she dared a glance, she found Ethan, not staring, not obvious, but always aware. His eyes met hers in flickers, like tiny sparks in a room full of dull glow. He didn't leer or smirk. He simply noticed. And that quiet noticing unraveled her more than any overt flirtation ever could. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. She caught her reflection in a darkened window and didn't recognize the woman there. A little breathless, cheeks warm, eyes alight. When had she last looked this awake? Lisa nudged her with a joke about someone's over-the-top dessert plate, and Emily forced a laugh. But her stomach twisted with a strange, fluttering anxiety. What was happening? Why did it feel like the room had two layers now? The party everyone else was enjoying, and the silent tension pulsing between her and Ethan like a second heartbeat. It felt wrong to admit how right it felt to be seen, to be remembered, to feel that spark in a place where she'd grown so used to the dim. And as the evening wore on, that quiet electricity only grew louder. The hallway was empty, dimly lit, her heels echoing softly against the hardwood floor as she slipped away from the crowd under the pretense of finding the bathroom. Emily needed a moment, just one, where the walls stopped spinning and her thoughts could land. She leaned against the cool wood of the closed door, heart thudding beneath her dress, hands trembling slightly though she couldn't say why. But she knew. She knew what was happening, even if she couldn't name it. It wasn't just Ethan's words. It was the way they lingered, the way her body remembered his voice before her mind could catch up. And then, as if her thoughts had conjured him, there he was again. Ethan, leaning against the wall like he'd been waiting for her all along. His posture relaxed, his presence anything but. She moved to pass him, to escape the weight of the moment. But he stepped in gently. Close, not too close, just enough to shift the air between them. "You okay?" he asked. The question was soft, but it settled heavy between them. She should have kept walking. Should have smiled politely and moved on. Instead, she stopped. "I'm fine," she whispered, not quite believing it. Ethan didn't flinch. "You don't have to pretend with me." And just like that, the hallway shrank, the noise of the party faded, and it was only them. Two people standing too close to a line neither was supposed to cross. But Emily couldn't move. Not yet. Because for once, she didn't want to. Just as the air between them thickened, charged with everything unsaid, and trembling on the edge of something neither dared name, Emily heard it. "Emily, everything okay?" William's voice, warm and familiar, echoed from the end of the hall like a lifeline or a warning. The spell shattered. She blinked, suddenly aware of how close Ethan was, how far she'd leaned in without even realizing. Her breath caught as she straightened, her spine instinctively pulling her back into composure. Ethan stepped away, subtle but swift, giving her space as though nothing had happened. "Yeah," she called out, her voice sharper than she meant it to be. "I'm fine. Just getting some air." William appeared a moment later, smiling, oblivious, his eyes kind. He walked up, kissed her forehead, and slipped his hand into hers. "They're bringing out coffee," he said. "Come on." She nodded, numb, letting him lead her back toward the light and the laughter, her hand warm in his, her heart cold with confusion. Behind her, Ethan said nothing. But as she glanced back over her shoulder, she saw his eyes still on her, unreadable. Not demanding, not apologetic, just present. And that somehow made it worse. Because it wasn't just a moment anymore. It was a fracture. A crack in the glass of everything she thought was solid. As William chatted beside her, she laughed at something she didn't hear. But deep inside she knew the truth. The line between safety and desire had just been drawn. And she'd been standing right on top of it. The next morning came wrapped in silence. The kind that lingered long after the world had started moving again. Emily stood in the kitchen, barefoot on cold tile, her fingers trailing absently along the marble counter as the coffee pot hissed and sputtered behind her. William sat at the table, flipping through the newspaper, humming a tune she vaguely recognized. It should have felt normal, comfortable even, but nothing felt familiar anymore. The laughter from the party, the low hum of conversation, the weight of Ethan's gaze, all of it haunted her like smoke clinging to fabric. She couldn't stop replaying it. His voice, his words, the way he saw her, really saw her. Every corner of her house, every routine of her morning, now felt like a museum of her former self, beautiful, preserved, but lifeless. When William asked if she was okay, she smiled, automatic. "Just distracted," she said. But the truth was deeper, Messier. There was a restlessness unfurling inside her, blooming in places she had long forgotten. A stirring, like wind under locked doors. It wasn't just about Ethan. It was about the mirror he'd held up. The one that reminded her she used to be something more than dependable. She used to be vibrant, curious, awake. And now, every soft kiss from William, every casual "love you" exchanged over toast felt like both comfort and ache. She wanted to shake it off, go back to the simplicity of before. But you can't unfeel something once it wakes you up. You just can't. The grocery store was almost empty. The kind of quiet that made ordinary moments feel suspended in time. Emily pushed her cart slowly down the produce aisle, pretending to study apples while her mind wandered to everything but dinner. She hadn't slept well in days. Ethan's voice still echoed in the quiet corners of her mind, and that magnetic tension still lingered like static in the air. She reached for a bunch of grapes, just as another hand did the same. Her breath hitched. It was him, Ethan, standing beside her like it was the most natural thing in the world, his smile soft, eyes just as knowing as the last time they'd met. "Emily," he said, his voice low and steady, "I was hoping I'd run into you." The simplicity of the sentence made her heart stutter. She managed a smile, her fingers tightening around the cart handle. "What are the odds?" she replied. Though she already knew this wasn't coincidence, it felt like gravity. "I've got a few people coming over tonight," he said, holding up a pack of skewers. "You and William should come." His gaze held hers for a beat too long. She nodded automatically. "I think we're planning to." He smiled again, that small, unreadable smile that both comforted and unsettled her. "Good," he said gently. "See you then." As he turned and walked away, Emily stood frozen among the fruit, her pulse loud in her ears. The world around her resumed, but inside, everything had shifted again just like that. Evening settled like velvet over Ethan's backyard. Strings of golden lights swaying in the breeze. Soft music humming beneath the clatter of cutlery and casual conversation. It was the kind of night that looked effortless, charming. But for Emily, every moment felt like walking a tightrope. William stood beside her, chatting about vacation plans with someone from work, but she barely heard the words. Her gaze kept drifting, pulled by a silent thread to where Ethan stood at the grill, flipping burgers like nothing was out of place. And then it happened. His eyes found hers across the yard, steady, unflinching. He didn't smile. He didn't look away. The world blurred around them. Emily's breath caught. He made his way toward her slowly, his steps deliberate, cutting through the noise like a secret. "Emily," he said, voice just above a whisper, "I need to talk to you." Her throat tightened. She glanced toward William, still engrossed in conversation, then back to Ethan. "What is it?" she asked, barely trusting her voice. He stepped closer but not too close, his expression unreadable and raw. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, words low but certain. "About us. I need to know if you feel it too." Her pulse thundered in her ears. The world didn't stop spinning, but for one suspended second, it felt like it could. Her mind screamed with all the reasons to walk away, but her heart, traitorous, wild, just stood there listening. And in that silence, everything she had buried rose to the surface, undeniable. Emily stood motionless, the words hanging between them like electricity in the air before a storm. "I need to know if you feel it too." Her heart beat wildly in her chest, a slow, rising drum that drowned out the music, the laughter, even the murmur of William's voice somewhere nearby. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came. Because the truth was terrifying, she did feel something. Not just a fleeting attraction or a dangerous thrill, but a deep, aching awareness. Ethan had cracked something open in her, something raw and long neglected. And in the space between his gaze and her silence, that feeling surged like a wave. She felt exposed, alive, seen. It was a terrifying contradiction. She loved William. He was good, kind, steady. He had built a life with her brick by brick. But Ethan had done something William hadn't done in years. He had noticed her. Not the version of her that hosted dinners, or picked up dry cleaning, or planned family vacations. Her. The woman beneath all the roles. The one she hadn't looked at in far too long. Her eyes flicked around the yard. Normalcy everywhere. No one knew a fault line had just cracked beneath her feet. And still, Ethan waited, respectful but unwavering. Emily finally whispered, "I don't know." And that was the truth. Not no. Not yes. Just a woman standing at the edge of something she couldn't explain. Her chest burning with the question she didn't know how to answer. Not yet. That night, the bed felt colder than usual, even with William lying inches away. He reached for her like he always did, wrapping an arm around her waist in that familiar, unconscious gesture of love and habit. And yet Emily couldn't relax into it. She stared at the ceiling, her eyes tracing shadows cast by the moonlight creeping through the blinds. William's breathing was slow, steady, comforting in its rhythm, but her own chest felt tight, like something heavy had settled just beneath her ribs. Ethan's words echoed relentlessly. "I need to know if you feel it too." And the worst part was she did. It wasn't about leaving or running away. It wasn't about chasing romance or danger. It was about a spark that had jolted her awake, made her remember the version of herself she thought had disappeared under the weight of years. The version who dreamed, who wanted, who felt. William stirred beside her and murmured, "Everything okay?" She forced herself to answer, "Just tired," knowing full well it wasn't the truth. She wasn't just tired. She was unraveling, torn between the safety of what she'd built and the pull of something she hadn't expected. She turned away gently, careful not to wake him, and stared into the darkness. This wasn't about Ethan, not really. It was about her. The question wasn't whether she would betray William. The question was whether she could keep betraying herself. And tonight, that answer felt a little closer to the surface than before. The following afternoon, Emily couldn't carry the weight of silence any longer. The questions circling in her mind were relentless, clawing for release. So she asked William to sit with her on the back porch, their quiet space, where they'd once dreamed about their future and laughed over wine. Now the breeze felt heavier, and her throat was dry. William looked at her with concern, sensing something deeper than small talk. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. His face tightened, but he nodded. Emily took a breath, steadying herself. "At the party, Ethan said something to me, and it made me realize I've been neglecting a part of myself for a long time." William's brow furrowed, but he stayed silent, listening. "He told me he sees something in me, something I haven't felt in years. And the truth is, I've been thinking about it ever since." The confession hung in the air, raw and trembling. William looked away, his jaw tense. But when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "I felt the distance too, Emily. I just didn't know how to fix it." That honesty nearly broke her. Because the pain between them wasn't about Ethan. It had been growing in the quiet corners of their marriage for years. And for the first time in a long while, they were finally staring it in the face. The moment wasn't about blame, it was a mirror. And neither of them could look away. The morning sun filtered softly through the kitchen window, casting golden light across the counter where Emily stood, her coffee growing cold in her hand. The house was still, filled with the quiet hum of a life that had always felt safe, predictable. But inside her, a storm had settled into something calmer, more certain. She had faced the hardest part, the truth. Now came the reckoning. She didn't run to Ethan. She didn't send any messages or seek out another moment alone with him. Because this wasn't about chasing a man, it never had been. It was about stepping out from behind the roles that had defined her for so long. Wife, mother, host, caregiver, reliable. Emily. Just Emily. She looked in the mirror that afternoon and for the first time in years, didn't search for who she used to be. She looked for who she was now, and who she could still become. She didn't have all the answers. Her marriage with William would take honest work, uncomfortable conversations, and maybe some painful decisions. But she was no longer afraid of the questions. And as for Ethan, he had been a spark, not a destination. A reminder, a mirror, a catalyst. The real journey was hers to walk alone, at least for now. And as she stepped outside into the morning air, barefoot on dewy grass, heart a little lighter and spine a little straighter, Emily realized something. Sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is remember who she is, and refuse to forget again. In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to lose yourself in the roles you play. Partner, parent, provider. Until one day, you look in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back. Emily's story reminds us that emotional connection, especially with ourselves, matters just as much as stability. Don't wait for someone else to see you before you start seeing yourself. Carve out time to reconnect with your passions, your truth, your needs. It's not selfish, it's necessary. Because only when you honor who you are beneath the surface can you truly show up, fully present in the life you've built.